So today, I'm hoping you guys remember that we finished, right? So we started talking about the different market structures in microeconomics, right? And we already finished talking about perfect competition. And then we looked at monopoly, right? So if you guys remember the market structures, right? We had like something like a spectrum, right? And then perfect competition was on one end of this spectrum, and monopoly was on a complete other end. Okay, so let me see. It was something. It went something like this, right? So, so this is where perfect competition, and then we had monopoly on all the way at the end, and then we had monopolistic competition in the middle, and then oligopoly, right? So these are the four different market structures that we are taking a look at, right? And then we already finished talking about perfect competition and monopoly, and today we're starting with monopolistic competition, right? So the reason we looked at the you know sort of the book ends, right? Perfect competition and monopoly first, and then we're going back to the middle, is because they're really sort of the extreme cases of what happens in the market, like the type of market structures that we talk about. These are the two extreme cases, and then it's once you have a basic understanding of what is happening with perfect competition and monopoly, it's much easier to understand like where monopolistic competition and oligopoly falls in the spectrum. So hopefully the name monopolistic competition rings or gives you some idea that this is a type of market structure that is going to be in between a monopoly and also a competition. So there are some characteristics, they share characteristics both with perfect competition and also with monopoly. Okay, so let's see what some of these characteristics of a monopolistically competitive market is. Okay, so first of all, there are relatively large number of farms, right? So there are more farms here than a monopoly market. How many or how many farm were there in monopoly?
One.
One. Very good, right? So that defines, if you're mono, you're just a single producer, single seller, right? So of course, with monopoly we had one farm, and in perfect competition we saw that there were infinitely many number of farms, right? Producers, sellers in perfect competition. So this is somewhere in between, where there is a relatively large number of farms, but it's not as much as perfect competition. But of course, it's more than monopoly, which is just one farm. So each farm has a fairly small share of the market, because there are quite a few farms competing in this market. And then we talk about the type of products that they sell here. So this is where they are sort of like a monopoly, right? In the sense that they're selling a product that is somewhat differentiated or heterogeneous. So if you think about perfect competition, we said that the product that they're selling is homogeneous, which means that they were absolutely perfectly or they're perfect substitutes for each other, right? They're exactly identical, right? And then with monopoly, they were selling something that was unique, right? That was original, that nobody else had. So here in monopolistic competition, the products that are being sold are they're heterogeneous. They are somewhat differentiated, right? Slightly differentiated from their competition. So each farm produces a close substitutes, right? So it's not perfect substitute like perfect competition. It's not unique, but it is a close substitute. So if I give you some examples now, this will become much more clear. So the type of or the some examples of monopolistically competitive markets would be restaurants, maybe fast food restaurants. So if you think about McDonald's burgers, right? They are the Big Mac, right? This that is a type of burger that McDonald's serves. It's fairly popular. It is slightly different than the burger that is being served at Wendy's, right? But it is also not something that is like something completely original or unique, right? That you wouldn't be able to find like a substitute for it, if Big Mac wasn't available when you wanted it, right? Some other examples might also be, so restaurants are a good examples, right? Hairdressers. Okay, so if you are just looking to get a haircut, right? That there can be many different salons or services that are available to you, and each one of them they're basically offering haircuts, right? They might be slightly different because they would have different hairdressers available, so there might be some differentiation in the product that they're offering or the service they're offering, but in essence it's pretty much just haircuts. Okay. um what else? Yeah, so maybe clothing stores. Okay, so different, if you think about clothing stores in a big shopping mall perhaps, right? They're all basically selling different clothes, and just in terms of making differentiation in terms of like styling or design or something. But they at least have some way to make their products a little bit different from their competitors. So this is what gives them like that sort of closeness or resemblance to a monopoly, that they have this sort of differentiated products, right? Gives them some sort of price making power, right? So if these products were exactly identical to each other, they wouldn't have any sort of influence over the price of their product, and it would make them like a perfect competition, but it is not the case. And then the last characteristic that we're going to discuss is that this type of markets have easy entry or exit. Okay, so there are very few barriers to entry or exit, which is different than a monopoly, right? So with monopoly, we said that there were huge barriers to entry or exit, that could come in like lots of different forms. There could be resources that are being controlled by one farm. There could be economies of scale where it just makes economically more sense for one farm to provide service for an entire market. So it's not the case with monopolistic competition. In this sense it is very similar to perfect competition, that there are few barriers to enter or exit, and so farms can come in if they see profits being made, or if they can exit this kind of industry if they see that there are losses being made. Okay, and then there are also major barriers to entry. So one of the major barriers to entry in this kind of market structure is providing advertising. Okay, so because these products they're somewhat different, but they're also very similar to each other, right? So it is only through advertising that these kind of farms can really broadcast to people that, hey, my burger, or my french fry, or whatever, not french fry, maybe my burger is better, it's more fresh, it's you know better looking than my competitors, right? So they have to spend a lot of money in advertising, trying to really convince customers that they're providing a better product. Okay, so in that sense, advertising could be like one of the major barriers to entry in this kind of market. Okay, any question here?
No.
Okay, great. All right. So profit maximization, right? So how is it that we think about profit maximization in monopolistically competitive industry. So um, hopefully, by learning that they are providing, or they're selling really a product that is differentiated and that is um, you know how do I say it? It's a differentiated product, right? So what we take away from this is that the individual farms in monopolistic competition, they face a downward sloping demand curve, right? Which is very different than perfect competition. And perfect competition, we saw that there was the demand that each individual farms were facing was perfectly elastic or horizontal, right? Which means that at this price of P star, they could sell as many quantities as they want, but there was no way for them to either raise the price, and they wouldn't have any incentive to lower the price, right? Because it just wouldn't make any sense. So this is perfect competition. And then with monopoly, we saw that it was only one farm, of course, so they faced the entire market demand. So whatever demand there is for that product, right, that one farm was facing the entire market demand. So it's a little different with monopolistically competition, only in the sense that each individual farm, right, they face a downward sloping demand curve, right? But the only thing that I want you to remember here is that they face the shape of the demand curve, it is downward sloping. The only difference is that with monopolistic competition, the demand curve might be a little bit more elastic, right? So it should make sense, right? If something is more elastic, right, which means that people are more responsive to changes in those prices, right? So with monopolistic competition, this is the case because the product that they're selling, it's not like they are something that is unique, right? People are not compelled, right, to buy it from one farm. If they raised their price quite a bit high, they can just go to someone else and buy a very close substitute from someone else, right? Whereas with monopoly, right, their demand curve tends to be more inelastic, which means that they're not very responsive to price because there is only one farm that is selling this unique or original product. If they raise their price and you don't want to buy it at that price, you just don't buy the product at all. It's not like you can go to someone else and buy it from someone else, right? So that's the one difference, right? That demand curve for monopolistically competition, right, it tends to be more elastic, right? So it should be like, it might be a little bit more flatter, right, not as steep. Okay, so with a monopoly, right, you don't necessarily have to draw it like very flat demand curve, right? So this would be a more inelastic demand curve, and this would be something that is more elastic, right? So that's more flat, this is more steep. But it is just something worth remembering, and it's like one type of difference between these two markets. Okay, and then the other difference is that we said that because the monopoly is a single farm, right, they face the entire demand that exists for this product in the market. It's not the case with monopolistic competition because one farm is not going to face the entire market demand curve because there are multiple farms, right? So demand curve faced by one farm isn't the market demand. Okay, and so those are the 2 points. So of course, as from monopoly, right, we said that farms have they face a downward sloping demand curve and also a downward sloping marginal revenue curve, right? And it is the same with monopolistic competition. They also face a downward sloping marginal revenue curve, which bisects, right, which will divide the horizontal axis in half. Okay, so it's that part is exactly same. So with monopoly, they have a downward sloping demand curve, downward sloping marginal revenue, and with monopolistic competition, it is exactly same. So they have a downward sloping demand curve and a downward sloping marginal revenue curve as well. And of course, anytime we want to talk about profit maximization, right? How are they going to find the or produce the quantity, like how much they should produce in order to maximize their profit? That quantity or that formula is the same for every type of market. It is where they will find or they will set their quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and then they will find the price from the demand curve. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Okay, so let's see. This is price, right? Horizontal, vertical axis price, horizontal axis quantity, and I'm going to draw the demand curve over here, the marginal revenue over here, and then I'm going to draw in the marginal cost curve. So we know that the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost is where they will choose their quantity. So this is how much is going to be produced. This is Q star. This is how much they will produce, but this is not where, like, this is not the level of price. Remember, they will find price by taking this Q star all the way up to their demand curve. So they're gonna ask, right? So at this Q star, what is the highest willingness to pay for this quantity? So that is the answer. The answer is over here, right? So they will produce Q star, but they will charge, right, this much, because this is where the Q star meets our demand, and this is how much a person or the highest willingness to pay for this quantity of Q star is. So I just take this and dash it over to the vertical axis to find my level of price. So this is the price that they're going to charge, and this is how much this monopolistically competitive farm is going to produce. So in that sense, it is very similar to the way we derived, how a monopolistically competitive farm, or sorry, a monopoly farm chooses their quantity and price. So they're exactly the same in that case. Okay, does everybody see that, or do you guys have any question?
So basically, the price is so what sets us apart from the perfect competition is that it's not a straight line. Basically.
Yes. So with perfect competition, remember the demand curve that each individual farm faces in perfect competition, right, is something like this. It's a straight line demand curve, which means that at this price they can sell as many quantities as they want. So this is quantity, right? So they can sell 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. But even if they were to increase their price like by 5 cents, this demand curve doesn't exist. It goes to zero, right? The quantity demanded goes to zero, because this is something we call a perfectly elastic demand, which means that it is very responsive to price, right? So even if price changes by a little bit, increases by a little bit, quantity demanded will go to zero, almost zero, right? So this is the here it is very different from perfect competition. So perfect competition, they have a horizontal demand curve, which means that their marginal revenue is the same as their price. But you will see in monopoly and monopolistically competition, right, the demand curve is over here, the marginal revenue is an entirely different curve, and the marginal revenue is always going to be less than price. So Simon?
Hyman.
Oh, Hyman. I'm so sorry, Hyman. So Hyman, I'm not sure how much time or how much opportunity you've had to catch up on all of this, right? Do you know what marginal revenue or marginal cost those things are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's great. So yeah, I was kind of worried, it's like you will have no idea what I'm talking about. That's great to know. So so does that make sense to you now, in that how this is different than perfect competition?
Yes.
Yeah. So with perfect competition, marginal revenue is always equal to price, which is equal to demand, which is equal to marginal cost. So all those things are equal in perfect competition. But with monopolistic competition, right, we will see that marginal revenue is always less than price. Okay. So here, going back to what we were discussing, we see that this is the quantity that they're going to produce. The price that they're going to charge is above, right? So where this quantity, right, we take it all the way up, and then where it meets the demand, that's the price. Okay. So then once we know quantity and price, we can also show how much profit there can be in short run. So what I want you to understand here is that monopolistically competitive farms can have profits or economic losses in the short run. They can have that. But so this is very similar, right, to perfect competition and also monopoly. We saw that everybody, perfect competition, monopoly, right, they both could have profits or losses in the short run. But what was different was that with perfect competition, those profits, right, didn't last in the long run because there were no barriers to entry or exit, and so people could come in when they saw profit and take some of those profits away. With monopoly, that was not the case because there are huge barriers to entry, so people can't really come in and take those profit away. So what do you think is going to happen? Also, before we get to that, let me just show you what that profit looks like. Okay. So in order to show profit, we're going to need to bring in the average total cost curve. So let's see if we bring in this average total cost. Remember, when we draw the average total cost curve, it's always going to hit its minimum when it crosses marginal cost, right? So it looks like this. So this is the average total cost curve, and from here we see that this would be my box for profit. Okay. So the difference between my price and ATC, right? So this is my average total cost of producing this Q star. So this P minus ATC times Q, that is my profit. And so this is my positive economic profit, right? Everybody follows? Hello?
Yes.
Where are the rest of my students? Max, Gabriel?
Yeah.
How are you guys feeling?
Good.
Good? Okay. So you see that, right? So this is, very similar to, the way we have been calculating profit, right? Or, show profit with average total cost and, total revenue, total cost and all that, right? So this is very similar. So now what is different, right, is what happens in the long run. So hopefully, as you can understand, in the long run, this is not going to last because there are, once again, easy entry and exit in this type of markets. Okay, so very quickly, let me show you, a case of the short run loss. So this is once again the demand curve, the marginal revenue curve, and then we draw the marginal cost curve, the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost right here. This is your the quantity, the profit maximizing quantity Q star that they're going to produce. And when I go up to the Q star and take it all the way to my demand curve, right, this is the price. This is the price that they're going to set. Okay, so this is P star and this is Q star. And what do you notice about this the average total cost curve now? Is it higher or lower than the price?
It is higher than the price.
Yeah, so at this quantity of Q star, see, this is how much the price is. But the average total cost of producing this Q star is all the way up here. So all of this, right, this is your loss, right? So this is your economic loss, right? You're not making economic profit or even normal profit, you're making economic loss. Okay, so would it be helpful to have me draw this diagram once again like I did on the previous slide?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So we do price on the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis, and this is demand curve, this is marginal revenue, and then I'm going to bring in the marginal cost curve. And at the intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue, remember, that's where the Q star is going to be. That's Q star over here. And I'm going to take it all the way up. This is going to be my P star. Okay, but I see that the price, right, for the price is of course a lot lower than the average total cost curve, right? That's what makes you have loss in the first place. So the let's see, it's at this Q star, right? I see that my average total cost of producing Q star is over here. Okay, so then I'm gonna draw in this box, this rectangle over here, which is gonna be my loss, which is economic profit less than zero. That is my loss. Okay, so all of this. So this is my average total cost of Q star. And of course, if my price is lower than my average total cost, of course, I'm making a loss. Okay. Does this help, Hyman?
Yes, definitely. But I have a question.
Yeah.
So, basically, it's always going to be a loss in the short run.
No. So remember in the previous slide, we saw a case of short run profit. So this was a profit where we saw that the price, right, was at this level over here, right? But then average total cost, right? So what we are comparing it against is our Q star, right? So here, right, you see that for me to produce this quantity of Q star, the average total cost is over here. So it's let's see, it's all of this height. That's my average total cost. But then the price that I receive to produce Q star, right, is all of that. So this P, right, was greater than my average total cost. And then, when I multiplied everything, if, let's see, do you know the profit maximizing formula? Or,
No.
No. Okay. So or, at least how to calculate profit? It's total revenue minus total cost, right?
Yes.
So total revenue comes from price times quantity, which is, price is over here. So it's this entire rectangle, all of this, right? Price times quantity, that's my revenue. And then total cost, right? We just rewrite it as average total cost times quantity. So then, what this allows us to do, right, instead of writing total cost, is it allows us to see it as a rectangle. So here, I can have this height, which was my average total cost, and then this base is my Q star, right? So then this gives me my total cost. So when I do, the total revenue minus total cost, this I'm left with profit. So if I understand how this can be confusing for you, if it's if you're still having like trouble visualizing this, it would, I think you would be you could really benefit from watching some of the previous lectures on producer theory when we talked about this, and also perfect competition. Have you had any time to watch some of those videos?
No, not really.
Okay, so that's gonna be really crucial, I think, at this point, because you've missed like almost like more than 2/3 of classes. So this is very hard to catch up at this point if you haven't watched the videos. So I'm going to like strongly encourage you to do that. Okay.
Okay.
So you can have, so to go back to your question, you can have profit or loss in the short run. You can have either one of those, right? So depending on, where your average total cost curve is located. Here it was below the price, right, at this quantity of Q star. But over here, right, in the next slide, we see that we have loss because at this quantity of Q star, our price is lower than our average total cost, right? Our average total cost was really high. So that's why you have loss. So you can have profit or loss in the short run, but then what happens is that there is adjustment in the long run, right? So in the long run, this is very similar to perfect competition. Okay, in the long run, each farm in the monopolistically competitive market will earn zero economic profit or normal profit. Okay, so this is, in this case, it's exactly like perfect competition. So we didn't have this with monopoly because there were no huge barriers to entry or exit in monopoly market. But because in this type of markets there are really not much barriers to entry, so new farms can enter the market when they see that there are profits being made, and essentially they can steal some of the customers away from existing farms. Okay, so we will see how that looks like on the graph. But what I want you to understand here is that uh, they're essentially creating less demand for the product of existing farms. So if you have um, what should I do? Let's see. If you are a gas station, right? You have a gas station in a great neighborhood where you get a lot of customers, and you're making a lot of economic profit, right? So other businesses, or other people that are looking to enter in this type of market, they will see that you're making a lot of economic profit, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to enter this market, right? This business of selling gases in your neighborhood. And they can do that because we just said that there are not really huge barriers to entry in this kind of markets. So once they do that, they're gonna come in and take they're really gonna shift some demand away from you, and get some of your customers. So here what happens is that there is a shift in demands, right? Because, and that happens because there are differentiated products. So maybe you're only selling gas, but maybe they will come in and they will also have like what do you call those you know they will sell other stuff in their gas station, or they'll serve coffee or something. So what they're going to do is essentially some steal your demand, steal the demand for your product, right, for your um, gas station. Okay, so then the entry causes a decrease in the demand for your product, and also a decrease in your marginal revenue. Okay, so basically both of those things will shift. Okay, and don't worry about what that looks like. I'm going to show it to you on the graph in a little bit. But it's just I want you to wrap your head around the logic first, and then we will see what happens. So same idea, when existing farms exit, when farms are making losses, economic losses in the short run in this kind of industry, they're going to want to exit in the long run. And what that really does when farms exit this type of market is that they are adding some demand to remaining farms. So some of the customers that these farms were servicing, right, they're gonna go back and now because they're making losses and they're exiting, some of those customers are gonna go to the farms that remained, right? So this is how there will be an increase in demand and an increase in marginal revenue for the farms that stayed. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So here we are talking about a hot dog shack. Okay, so Bob, he has a hot dog shack. Okay, and hot dogs are um, kind of differentiated products, right? Maybe he has, they're sort of similar, but you can only find Bob's hot dog at Bob's, right, at his shack. You wouldn't be find it at David's, Gerard's, Maya. So these are Bob's competitors: David, Gerard, Maya, Daniela, and Abe. So they're all selling hot dogs, but maybe each one of their products or each one of their hot dogs is slightly different, based on their like meat or the type of flavors, the type of sauces they're providing. So they're each a little bit different. Okay, so here, let's see. So we're talking about a case where Bob is having economic profit in the short run. Okay, so let's see. So this is the original demand, original marginal revenue curve, and then I'm going to bring in the marginal cost curve. Okay, so this is Q star, this is P star. Okay, and okay, so maybe a little bit below like this. Okay, and then we're going to draw in the average total cost curve. Okay. So it looks a little bit different because remember, it's going to have to hit its minimum when it crosses the marginal cost. Okay. So something like that. Okay. So then you see that, Bob's hot dog. So he is currently making an economic profit. And where is that area of economic profit? Who can show
Above,
it?
from the point where the ATC meets the Q star. So I don't know, how can I signal it?
How can, sorry?
Like, can I point at it or?
So if you were able to log in, I'm sure you could, but right now because you're not logged in, I don't think you could. But
Actually, I just
oh,
logged in. Yeah.
okay, so yeah, now I think you could. So you can use this cursor.
All right. So it would be right here,
Good.
all the way over
Yeah,
here, and
right.
then this is
Okay,
the
yeah,
rectangle.
exactly. Very good. So that would be the profit box, right? So I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna circle it in because, I have to show the shifts right now and it gets really messy to have all of these things. Okay, so good understanding. And yeah, we'll just see now. So now we see that, this Bob person, right? He is, he has killer hot dogs, so he's making an economic profit, right? So now Joseph, right, is another person who sees that all of these if Bob is making profit, economic profit in this market, it is likely that his competitors might be doing the same. So this Joseph, who is another person who is interested in selling hot dogs, so he wants to enter this hot dog market and he wants some of that profit for himself. So he will enter this market, and the way we show that in on the graph is by shifting our demand and our marginal revenue. Okay, so think about the demand and marginal. So this is the demand and marginal revenue for Bob's hot dog. So what happens when this other person Joseph comes in? So what does that do for the demand for Bob's hot dog? Does it shift it to the right or left?
To the left.
Okay. Does everybody understand? Max? Moe?
No.
No?
Can I get an explanation of why it goes to the left?
Okay, so because this is about what is happening to Bob's hot dog. So Joseph, this person is coming in, right? And he is selling, right, his own version of hot dogs, right? So what is going to happen is some customers, right, from Bob's, right, is gonna go to Joseph now. Okay, so demand for Bob's hot dog is going down. So some of those customers that was with Bob in the first place before Joseph came in, now they're gonna go to Joseph and get, become, his customer essentially. So the demand for Bob's hot dog, so this demand is going down. That's why it shifts left. Does that make sense now?
Demand goes down, but price stays the same.
No, let's see. So demand is going down. So if demand is going down, marginal revenue is going to go down as well. Okay, that's it. They just have to happen at the same time. Okay, because marginal revenue is essentially, right, it's related to your demand.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to show them like shifting parallelly. Okay, that's the only way. So of course, remember, anytime we show shifts in our supply and demand, they have to be parallel shifts. So this is what we're going to do. Okay, parallel. So I have to do it carefully because here I'm trying to show you guys that at the end that there is zero economic profit. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is our new demand, T1. And then this is going to be our new marginal revenue curve. Okay. So you see there the demand curve, right? D1 is parallel to the new demand. It shifted left. And then the marginal revenue curve M1 is parallel to the original or the old marginal revenue MR. Okay? Does everybody see that? So they shifted left, both of them. So we went from D to D1 and then MR to MR1. So now we have a new marginal revenue curve. Okay? We have a new marginal revenue curve. So of course, the profit maximizing quantity is no longer the same. The profit maximizing quantity is now over here, where marginal cost intersects MR1. Okay? Which is over here. So this is Q1, which is less than before. And then the price is over here. Okay? So this is P1. The price is lower than before as well. But what else do you notice about that price? What is the average total cost of producing Q1?
It is the same as the point at which the demand is getting up. It is
right.
the same
yes.
as the price.
Yeah.
As
so
the average total cost is basically intersecting the price.
Yeah, good. So at Q1, right, the price is P1, right? So this is that whole box, that's my total revenue. Okay. And then I see that at Q1, my average total cost is at that same point. So which means that my total revenue is equal to my total cost, which means that I have what?
Normal profit.
Yeah, so I have zero economic profit or normal profit. Okay, so this is in essence, what happens when there are profits or losses in the short run. So here, right now we're talking about profit. So anytime there is economic profit being made in the short run in monopolistic competition, right? You will see when new farms enter, and they can do that because there are no barriers to entry or exit, they will enter, and the demand curve, right, will shift in, right? Because some of the customers, right, some of their customers are now gonna be taken by the new farm. So their demand curve shifts in, the marginal revenue curve shifts in, and what that does essentially is gonna decrease. It's gonna decrease the quantity, the profit maximizing quantity, and also your price. Okay, and it's going to decrease all the way until there is zero economic profit being made. So here, I shifted the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve, right, carefully in a way so that it intersected. When I got P1, it intersected, at the level where my total revenue was equal to total cost, right? So I purposefully did that, but of course it doesn't automatically happen this way at first, and a few farms come in, so maybe the demand curve is only shifting by a little bit, right? And then the marginal revenue shifts by a little bit, so there are still profits, but it gets down. I'm sorry, the profit is being less and less, right? And it will the new farms will keep coming in until, right, price is at a point, right, where it is just equal to the average total cost, right? You see that price here is equal to the average total cost, right, for this quantity of Q1. So this is what gives them zero economic profit. So farms keep coming in until this happens, okay, until there is no more economic profit to enjoy. Have I lost you guys, or Max, Moe, Gabriel? How are you guys feeling? Patricia?
I'm understanding.
Okay. Moe?
I'm okay.
Okay. Gabriel?
I'm okay.
Okay. Good. So it's not very different than all the things that we have already seen, right? The only difference here was that we were shifting our demand curve and our marginal revenue. We have to shift both, and remember to shift them parallelly. Okay, so the demand D1 shifted parallelly to D, MR1 shifted parallelly to MR. Okay. So that's with profit, and then it's the same idea with short run losses. Okay, so this we're gonna wrap up in our next class, right? Short run losses and how that looks. Yeah. Do you guys have any other questions I can answer?
No, I'm good.
Good. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm good. I just misunderstood a little bit the beginning.
What was your misunderstanding? Can I help you?
No, I just didn't read that it said losses and profit. So.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, don't worry
Yeah.
about it. I'm glad. Thank you. All right, I will see you all next Tuesday then.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.